Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I'm joined by the amazing Robert Clark. Robert, how you doing today, man?
Good. I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's really nice to have you here. But
Yeah, thank
before we
you.
talk about why you're here, Robert, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit.
All
You are
right.
a lover of film of all types, especially horror and comic book, big comic book geek. What do you
Yep.
think about the Robert Downey Jr. news? I got to know that real quick.
I am cautiously optimistic, as I like to say. I'm hopeful that it'll turn out well.
I think that's the big thing. Like, we know what he can do. I think we just got to have
Yeah,
fun with it, roll with the punches.
exactly. I think that's ultimately where it comes down to is that I think that he is coming at it because like I've got to assume that he's not going to do this just for a paycheck. I mean, don't get me wrong, apparently the paycheck is really good, but I
I'll
think
be
that
Doctor Doom
for
for
him
30 million, let alone 60.
right, right. So like I think that ultimately it comes down to he's probably not going to come back unless it's going to be engaging enough for him and interesting enough for him to do. So he seems to be that kind of actor. So
I agree with you. Because at this point, like you said, he doesn't need the money.
yeah,
Like he's not gonna. Like you said, the paycheck is very good, but he's gonna
right,
do something that makes sense for him right now. Not something that's just there to make a paycheck and go home. He's at the point in his career where
right,
he's gonna want to do something that jumps off the page at him.
right. Absolutely. Yeah. And this seems like a fun way to do it. It's not going to have any lasting like impact on the Doctor Doom character as a whole for the MCU going forward. It's just something fun to do as an aside. So, it's just, should be interesting. That's my hope anyway.
Right. And again, as fans, we don't want to see something that's a piece of shit either. So we really want to
Right.
see him
Yeah.
come out and give 100%. But
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
yeah, you do combine your love of horror and comic books into your podcast, Creepy and Geeky, where you talk to guests
Yeah.
about all forms of movies, music, horror, comic books, cult film. So
Yeah.
what gave you the desire to want to actually start the podcast?
Oh, well, I've always, wanted to do something creative, but I lack the focus and the discipline to really write or do anything else like that. So I was just like, what could I do that would be interesting and fun for me to do? And so I was like, well, I could do a podcast, and I've tried a couple of times in the past, and thankfully this one stuck. Um, and it's a lot of fun to do. I've had a lot of great guests on, and I hope to have a lot more on in the future.
Right. Well, and the best thing about that, guys, you don't have to go far to hear the podcast because I have all the links for Creepy and Geeky right down in the description. So make sure you're following him on social media. Make sure you're subscribing and following the podcast. That way you can become a part of that family as well. So,
Yeah.
Robert, in order for you to talk to guests about horror, horror had to start for you somewhere. So, my friend, I would like to go back to the past and talk about
All
what
right.
got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And, Robert,
Yeah.
the first horror movie you watched was.
Here's the thing. So I'm not really sure, which is funny, pun not intended. But the first movie that I can recall seeing that was a horror movie was 1982's The Thing by John Carpenter.
And let me tell you, what an amazing start to your horror world. Um, and
Especially when I
most
was
people,
because I was 8.
right? I think most people would die for that to be their first horror movie, just because of the impact that movie's had.
Oh
So,
yeah.
we know that you were young, very young when you watched it. Very young,
Yeah.
8 years old. Do you remember who you were with the first time you had seen it?
Oh, I mean, I was had to be at least with my mom, if not, my mom, and I think it's just my mom, maybe my at the time would have been stepdad, became my adopted dad later. Um, so it's my memory is so fuzzy about everything. So, but it would have had to been with my parents.
Right.
They were pretty fairly unrestrictive about stuff like that. So I got to watch a lot of weird horror stuff growing up.
And like I said, that's a great way. One of arguably not only the best remakes of all time, but arguably
Oh
one of the
yeah.
best horror movies of all time.
Oh yeah.
Um, I've heard the argument made for that to be the best horror movie, and I cannot say no. There's nothing I can say to be like, you're wrong. That's how
Right.
great this movie is. And it's still so impactful to this
Oh
day.
yeah.
Practical effects hold up. The soundtrack or the score is fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
But do you remember what
Yeah.
scene it was that affected you the most?
Oh, I mean, come on, hands down, it's got to be the sequence where they're trying to save the guy, and they go to give him the chest compressions, and his chest opens up and bites off the other guy's arm. It's just one of those memorable scenes that just sticks with you, just for like the intensity and the awesome practical effects by Rob Bottin at the time. So it's just, I don't know, it's just that's one scene that'll always stick with you. Once you see that movie, if you've never seen The Thing, you should definitely see The Thing. And you know once you see that scene, it'll stick with you pretty well.
And I guess that's what you get when you try to give people a uh, chest compression right in their stomach. Maybe next time aim
Right.
for the chest, not the
Yeah, aim
stomach.
for the chest. I mean,
But again, what an amazing moment in the film. And then
yes.
obviously after that, like you have the head elongation
Yeah.
and um which turns into the spider head,
Yeah.
and you get the spider head running around and so impactful. That's even homaged in It Chapter 2,
Yeah.
with young Stan in the fridge, and then his head does the spider thing, and Richie's like, "You gotta be fucking kidding me." Like
Right.
that's how important this movie and that scene
Yeah.
alone is to a lot of people. So,
Oh yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
while that was the most impactful scene for you, what would you say your favorite scene from John Carpenter's The Thing would be?
Hmm. Um, I like it's kind of hard to say because the movie's just chock full of really great moments. But the blood testing scene is really good. That's a lot of fun. Just the intensity, like the tension that's in there, just waiting for something to happen, and when it finally does, it just goes nuts. So
Mhm.
it's a fun scene for sure.
And you've made it as a horror movie when South Park parodies you in one of their episodes, and um, when you have the lice capades episode, and Cartman's doing the blood test to figure
All
out which one of
right.
them has lice, um, and to this day, one of the best jump scares of all time.
Oh
Like
yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
freaking the hell out the first time I had seen that scene. Like as a kid, like what the hell is happening here? Like
Oh
there
yeah,
is really evil here now. So, um, again, a scene that is just so iconic in pop culture. It's been
yeah,
referenced in other horror movies. It's been parodied in cartoons. Just
yeah.
a super iconic scene and a super iconic movie. So, um, as horror fans, we do love the deaths, Robert. So I gotta know,
Yeah.
which death from the thing would you say was the one that stuck out the most to you, or is your favorite from the film?
Hmm. It's hard to say. There's I don't know. It's so there's so many like intense great scenes. It's so hard to like pick any one of them out. Which is unfortunate just because they are so good. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And I don't think there's really not a right or wrong answer to this, just because
Right,
every
right.
scene in the movie, you always have that constant feeling of dread and
Oh
anxiety.
yeah.
And who is the thing? Who is not the thing? What can we do to
Right.
prove who the thing is and who it isn't? So, um, the thing in 2011 got the prequel treatment.
Mhm.
They do have a prequel to the thing. Have you seen the prequel, and what were your thoughts on it?
I did see it. I thought that it was good. It wasn't great. I think that if they had stuck to the practical effects that they did have for it, that that they would have it would have been a lot more successful. But because they went and did a little too much, like I didn't mind some of the digital effects that they were doing with it. But a good mixture would have been better than what they ended up with. They ended up leaning a little too hard into the digital, and that kind of it didn't ruin it, but it definitely didn't add anything to it in a good way. So
I will say I absolutely adore that movie. The
Yeah,
CGI
it's not
pisses
bad.
me off. Like
Yeah.
it's like you said, like the original is known for being a staple in
Yeah.
practical effects, and then the CGI that you get in 2011, release the practical cut, please. We know it's out
Right?
there. Just give
Yeah.
it to us.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and
if
I
they
do
ever
like how
did
it ends
re-release
on,
that, that would be awesome. Yeah.
oh, dude, yeah, put me in, coach. I want to play. Um,
Right.
I would kill to be able to see that, but I love how it's a surprise prequel. A lot of us went into
Yeah.
this thinking it was a remake of the film, and we see the dog, and you're like, no way, is this really what we're doing right now? Like, what a brilliant idea for this
No, it
movie
was.
because
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's
yeah,
what made it that's what made it ultimately like more interesting and why I can give it like a lot of leeway on it because it's telling at least a somewhat original story. It's giving us that
right.
backstory of that location before the moments in the first movie. So it's definitely, and that's what's great about each version of the thing that we've had so far is that because uh Carpenter's was based on the story that was also previously done as the thing from another world in the 50s, and that version's even different from what Carpenter's is. So
Yeah,
it's really fun to get these different takes on the whole mythology.
I agree with you. And I think that because if we watch a sequel, or I'm sorry, a remake that is pretty much shot for shot, scene for scene what we've already seen, it
Yeah,
loses a lot. If
it
you're going to
does.
remake
Yeah.
something, make it your own. I don't want to see the
Right.
same thing I've already
Yeah.
seen before, and
Yeah.
probably better. At least take a
Right.
chance
Yeah.
and do something a little bit different here. And this is back in
Yeah. No.
2011 when we weren't doing the every requel has the same title as the original. So when we saw this thing 2011, we
Right.
were like, oh my gosh, they're remaking this film. How are they going to do this? And then
Right.
you get there and you're like, you get to that ending and you're like, I see you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I see a little too much of you with the CGI, but I do.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I've had an amazing time talking about the thing, obviously, and what the thing means to you being your first horror movie. But here for a second, I do want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. My little
Yeah.
buddy Joe's face is here, and he has a question for you.
Okay.
What's your favorite scary movie, Robert? Uh, what is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Oh man. Well, I don't really have any singular favorite horror movie, but I do have a favorite horror franchise, and that would be the Evil Dead franchise. So I just love that whole every single movie, and that's a winner for me. So
Can't argue. Um, I think that even including Ash versus the Evil Dead, one of
oh
the
yeah,
greatest
absolutely.
franchises. There's not a miss in that whole
No,
franchise. Um,
not yet. Yeah.
Funny enough, my least favorite in that franchise is the OG Evil Dead.
Yeah,
And
I think I lean towards that as well. Just because it sets everything up so good. And then it's in a lot of ways it's redone even better in Evil Dead 2. So, and that's
yeah,
what I like about it is it's got its place, but because they were able to go back and kind of just redo everything and make it just a little bit better in that second one, it's just like perfect. Evil Dead
right.
2 is very very good, even though Evil Dead 2 like is like, even with me, like I put Evil Dead 2 lower just because I have other favorites in the franchise. It's still super high up there. None of these are less than 4 stars for me. So
Right.
out of 5.
See, and I think that Evil Dead 2 is probably going to be my favorite. But I remember watching it for the first time being like, why are you taking another girl there, bro? You already lost everybody. Why are you doing this again?
Right,
Um,
right.
I mean, because, Evil Dead 2 really is kind of a hard reboot of the first one.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Raimi was like, what is this? Money? Okay, I'm using the shit out of
Right.
this.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's just like an Ash is definitely not Ash in the first Evil Dead. Like he's definitely kind of
He's
a
not the
bit in that
Yeah,
first
he's
movie.
not the Ash we find later. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's just what's great is like Evil Dead 2 just really kind of solidifies everything. And see, for me, my favorite is always going to be Army of Darkness, which is the weird outlier of them all because it doesn't have the same tone as everything else. It's more silly. It's more of an action comedy with some horror elements. But it's the one I saw first. So it'll always hold a special place in my heart, like it being the top. But yeah, every movie in that series is just so good. It's hard to say that any of them are a bad one.
Oh, Medieval Dead. How
Yep,
they
Medieval
missed their
Dead.
chance by not naming it Medieval Dead.
They tried. The studio was just like, no, we can't do that. That's just silly.
Right.
That was dumb. That was dumb.
Yeah.
They should have just retroactively once it was successful and just gone, yeah, let's just recall it Medieval Dead now.
It's just so good. Like I said, that's a franchise that I can put on, start at one, go all the way through Rise, and just be completely happy because it's
Yeah.
that damn good of a franchise, man.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely agree.
we've talked about your first horror movie. We've talked about your favorite horror franchise, but before I let you go, Robert, we always bounce back to the same question. We're gonna go back to The Thing, and what we're gonna do is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're
Okay.
not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. We're not being critics. What we're doing
Hmm.
is ranking The Thing on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So, zero skulls being not effective, five being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle.
All
Robert,
right.
what would your ranking of The Thing be for how much it affected you?
I would say I'd give it 4.5 skulls for sure. It's high up there for me in terms of and it was one of those movies that at the time I would say, when I was a kid, it didn't affect me. It wasn't until much later,
Sure.
into my adulthood, that I was like, I could really actually sit and appreciate it more. So once I've been able to kind of, get back into it, then it like definitely has affected me. Like, so with Carpenter's filmography and everything like that, it's my solid number two. But my number one favorite of his will always be They Live.
Oh, nice.
So
I'll say I love
yeah.
that shirt, by the way.
Yeah,
All the
thank you.
Carpenter VHSs.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so
Even got the
dope,
thing.
man. Yeah, yeah. And They Live is fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Hot Rod, Roddy Piper, letting
Yeah.
you know what time it is. I came here to chew some bubble gum and kick some ass, and I'm all out of bubble gum, baby.
And
Um,
it's just so relevant. It's still relevant today as much as it was in the 80s.
you are
So
not lying whatsoever. Carpenter's out there somewhere going, told you.
yep. Yep.
Bet
He's
I
he's
bet
sitting there
you wish
just
you had
sitting
those
back, just
fucking glasses now, don't you?
cashing those royalty checks on every single one of his movies.
I know I said it at the beginning, guys, but we are at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before that happens, make sure you go to the link in the description. Make sure you are following Robert on social media. Make sure you're subscribing to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. That way you can check it out, become a part of that family as well. Robert, please
Yeah.
don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you.
All
Um,
right.
Everyone else, if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help build the channel more than you know. And follow SledgeHammer Horror on social media. Our links are in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.